Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes, and already we saw from the social media many of the organizations are sharing our shows because it's based on space policy, and we have our expert, Mr. Dan. Already, I think from World Talent Economy Forums, everybody know about him. He's expert in AI. We have our superstar, Mr. Tom. Everybody know him for his contribution in AIs and the developing nations contributions, as well as we have Mr. Raw. He is a super smart and always he tried to contribute for World Talent Economy Forums in many ways. So, hello everyone. How are you today?
Good morning. Doing
Good
great.
morning.
Excellent, excellent. I just want to start with Mr. Dan. That how do you want to introduce the space policy and these things with our World Talent Economy Forum?
Oh, well, here we have one other person here.
Yes.
Well, I think 2020 was a really great year for the private spaceflight industry, and in particular, I've been following what's going on at SpaceX very closely. In fact, I follow a lot of very popular people on YouTube. One of them is called the Everyday Astronaut, and that's where I got this shirt, which features one of the engine designs they have, and we had a number of really exciting things happen in 2020. In particular, we saw the test flight of the first Starship prototype from SpaceX, and the deployment of the what's it called? The Starlink satellites for internet by SpaceX. And then there's another startup called Astra, which is based in California, which launched and put their first vehicle into space. It did not achieve orbit, but they plan to launch into orbit very soon. And then we have just a lot of things happening. There's another startup called Rocket Lab, which recovered their booster for the first time. They actually, I believe they actually caught the booster out of the air using a helicopter. Well, actually, I think at first it landed in the ocean, but then they plan to catch it in future missions. So 2020 was kind of a depressing year in general, but it was a very exciting year for private spaceflight. And I am just a kind of an observer, just a fan, sort of. I'm not an expert in this field.
Okay,
but I'm
thank
happy
you.
to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. We have Mr. Tom. So, Mr. Tom, how do you want to introduce this space policy and how actually it can be helpful for the different kind of developing nations, how it works? Because we have youth communities, maybe they can learn different aspects about spaceships.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like Dan, I'm not an expert in this field. I am a fan of space and have followed it all my life. And I have been very excited this year about the events that have happened with SpaceX and others, and just this whole trend that we are in, where the privatization of space, where NASA is outsourcing all of its real technical efforts to private companies like SpaceX. And I think that also spurs a lot of innovation. NASA, when it's a public company or public agency, other than a moonshot or some major national thrust, didn't really need to innovate. I mean, they continued to, But now with private companies involved and the competition therein, there's a lot of advancements. And what was just so amazing was what SpaceX was able to do with the, retrieving of the rockets landing on the pads. And it's like Buck Rogers. I used to think that was the worst example of what a spaceship could do when it could land again, like the way it was. But then he does it, and so it's just it's really fascinating. I think for developing countries, there is an opportunity there. Because it is more privatized and there's more competition. It's not just an American NASA that is forging all this stuff. There's a lot more opportunity globally for great minds to come in and to innovate, and especially with the potential colonization, if you will, of Mars. There's a lot of opportunity to innovate there too. So I think it's just a good thing globally for Earthlings in general. This next space age that we're entering.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rob, you have a lot of experience from tech industry. You involved with IBMs and many different fields of the technology. So, as well as you are expert in strategy developments. So, how do you want to introduce these spaceships and spaceships policy, and how it will be helpful for the developing nations? What your
Well, probably the best example is the recent contract between the European Space Agency and a Swiss startup called ClearSpace to clear the junk out of orbit. That's a government agency driving an effort using a relatively small private Swiss company, which is in startup mode, to clear up one of the problems represented by space. Other problems being looked at is cutting back on the sun's effect on the planet. That's being researched by a variety of people, including Bill Gates Foundation. And then we've got the Musk efforts to go out and mine the asteroid field, along with his efforts to colonize Mars. Clearly, those kinds of efforts are going to require some type of government oversight, so that governments don't end up going to war over rights to minerals or rights to land in those areas. So this is an emerging space. The United States, of course, has launched its own space force, basically a militarized organization for space. And I would expect other agencies, other countries to do something similar, at least the larger ones, to eventually do something similar. So no one country has ownership. So government is getting involved in space, and the typical things that government do to protect the planet, to remove junk, and to control business so it doesn't get out of hand when we move to other planets and other resource materials. It's a fascinating area right now, and clearly as these government efforts expand, smaller firms like that Swiss firm, ClearSpace, could come up in almost any place and piggyback on some of the larger efforts that exist out in the world.
Thank you. Ma'am, you have a lot of experience on spaceships, and you have a very good ecosystems, and you have a lot of friends, those who have involvement with this spaceships and this kind of things. On the other hand, that I want to share, like country like Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, and we are developing this ecosystem as well. So how do you want to introduce your point of view in terms of spaceships and these things? Chiara, can you unmute?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you. No, I didn't understand that you were talking to me. So, yeah, in Europe, we just signed an agreement with between ESA and NASA for the lunar gateway. So we are really happy to cooperate with United States and other partners to to develop technologies that will allow us to go to the moon and stay there for a while. And so I think it's really important to have space policies that allows private companies to enter in the great game of the new space economy. So the thing is that, as I always say to my startups, the first thing you have to think about is to get a good lawyer if you wanted to send something in space. So yeah, of course, it's a really important thing, and yeah, I think that space, and this is my point of view, but many other people don't have this point of view, that space should remain something that could be accessible for everyone and safe for everyone. So I know that it's a controversial question, this thing that we could use space for other things that to develop and grow all together. So we know that space now is the most desirable space for geopolitics. So we live in a very complex era.
Okay. Thank you. My common question to everyone, like example, when we develop different kind of ecosystem, even though what I observing from the different kind of developing nations country, they are also developing universities based on spaceships and this kind of science and engineering, as well as different university, different government taking initiative to grow their ecosystem. What actually Chiara said, uh, developing startups and these things, yes, developing nations, I believe that they have to go long way to develop different kind of innovative and exclusive startup for this kind of things. But my questions to our panelists, that how developing nations, they can build a better ecosystem and how it will be benefited for them, like in terms of
I just have
space.
a few high-level thoughts on that, because I was actually two years ago, I was at this conference in DC called, which is run by the National Space Society, and there were lots of people there from all over the world. I think it's called the International Space Development Conference. I was only there for one day, but there were a lot of people there from India, and it seemed, and I think a lot of countries are developing their space agencies. And I think it's a great strategy because it excites people about science and technology, especially young people. So it's not only important for, future economic development in outer space, but also for building up your science and technology sector, because it gets so many people excited about engineering and science. So I think that's great. And countries, I think it's a matter of policy. It makes a lot of sense to be building up your space agency and activities in space. What we're seeing right now is sort of, in my opinion, certain companies in the U.S. sort of really running out in front in terms of the reusable technology, which is going to be a lot cheaper. I don't know how hard it will be for other countries and other companies to catch up. I believe SpaceX made some of their patents available. So they had a lot of things that were patented at first, and then they decided to basically open source a lot of their technology. So that might help. But I really don't have a good sense of how viable it is to compete with these companies that have reusable tech. It probably will become easier in a few years as the technology sort of gets more spread out and disseminated. But right now, I think the U.S. companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Rocket Lab, which is a joint U.S. New Zealand company, are really kind of out ahead. So that would be my. So I think you need to be aware of that if you're trying to start a startup. That you have some pretty intense competition there. But certainly I don't want to discourage anyone.
Yeah.
So those are just some ideas. The other thing I hope we can discuss would be the militarization of space, because that's another issue that is a policy issue.
Mhm.
It's a whole other subject, but that unfortunately is a subject we have to talk about, because basically China and the US are developing in that direction.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
And
you.
I'd love to hear what Chiara has to say about this, because she seemed to actually have worked in policy
I
and
think
space
you forgot
policy.
India, because you know that India tested a satellite weapon, a satellite destroyer weapon that really made a mess. But I will say something later.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tom.
Oh yeah, just going back to the idea of America's kind of cornered the market in the reusable area, but I think other countries, developing countries in particular, can find a niche, because we're talking about we're going to need especially if we colonize Mars or move out, we're going to need every type of material, resource, specialization in certain areas of habitats and things like that. So it might be smart for certain areas, for certain countries, to find a niche to exploit and to really hone in on. America may have cornered the market on reusable rockets and getting people to places, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for developing countries to maybe do what they do best. Finding where their main manufacturing trends are and move those towards space. As far as militarization, that can hinder a lot of this stuff, because that will mean military contracts, and there will be more clamping down on the opportunities for private companies and developing countries to get into orbit. And so that's kind of a controversial issue. I think there needs to be a two-pronged approach. Sure, there's going to be the military agenda, and that's already underway with Space Force and things like this. But there also needs to be a private kind of global initiative to keep, like the International Space Station theory out there, keep space open, keep to kind of just balance out the militarization, because that will really hinder a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of innovation, in fact.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rob.
Well, Dan brought up a rocket lab, and it's probably one of the better showcases of how a small country could get involved with a larger country to solve a problem. That's a joint project involving New Zealand, and clearly New Zealand's a relatively small country, not a lot of resources to go out into space themselves, but certainly can partner to develop a solution and work that way. For the emerging nations, partnership is probably the best path. As well as converting their education systems to bring out the kinds of aeronautical engineers that work on space programs and that kind of thing, because clearly those jobs are going to be in short supply, especially bridged experts that have capability and maybe multiple competencies, engineering and medicine, space medicine primarily, engineering, artificial intelligence, a lot of what's going to go on in space is going to be handled by robots, and partnerships with one of the companies that can do heavy lift to get those robots into space or onto Mars or one of the other planets can help expand that country's reach. And as we commercialize space, it's very likely those countries that have an interest in outer space will be delineated from those that do not through access to resources and the economics that come with that. Clearly, the first country that colonizes Mars, assuming that we can move materials between the two planets, will gain a eventual significant economic benefit once those commercial efforts become viable and profitable. which may take a while. So it's not like there's a huge rush and they're behind the 8 ball and they can't catch up. We're still on the emerging side of space exploration, and we don't have really many commercial space efforts that are profitable outside of satellite delivery. And so and there'll be a number of others that will come up once we get going. The mining of the asteroids looks particularly profitable if you can overcome some of the heavy lift costs that the companies are overcoming with reusable space vehicles. So it's an emerging opportunity. It's an opportunity the small country can't do by itself, but certainly can use countries like New Zealand as an example to partner with larger entities and play a role. And we probably should take a whole separate angle on the militarization of space side issue, because that's particularly interesting, and it's likely to get not only is it a broad subject in science fiction, it has been for years, but it's an area that really hasn't been well explored with regard to laws and regulations, and will likely result in a number of conflicts as countries argue over who owns what. And hopefully those conflicts will stay well away from the planet. They won't.
Thank you, sir. Chiara, what do you want to add for this, like spaceships and specifically creating better ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know if you are aware about this, but starting from 1976 with the Space Treaty, they established some rules about how to use the outer space, and this is going on still today. And UNOSA has a large number of programs to involve emerging nations to benefit from space economy, from what space can do for emerging economies, like monitoring Earth, and so using space and space data to address SDGs for 2030 agenda. So I encourage everyone to look at those possibilities. Like there is a program called Access for All, and this program helps companies or institutions to send in space some, for example, some experiments. So yeah, I think things are moving in this way, and I think that it's not gonna be so difficult once we will have access also for internet, for everyone. So projects like Starlink are really important for the development of space benefits for emerging countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. My major question is that like Chiara actually come up with the idea of economic benefit, and already even last year I can remember in International Islamic University we organized a workshop on spaceships and these things, and when the expert comes, I see actually huge response from the youth community. Those who are young, they have very good interest on the spaceship and this kind of industry. They want to contribute. So my question is that how they can develop their profession in that area, and number two, how it helps for developing the economy of developing countries. If we take as a model like Indonesia or Vietnam's or this kind of countries. Yes, Mr. Dan.
Well, I think I don't have a lot to add above what I already said, which is that it by having a space program and incentivizing startups, maybe having your government provide some seed money for startups, even if those startups fail and the space program doesn't fully, isn't like launching people to the moon, it will really excite the young young citizens about science and technology. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And now, unfortunately, it is hard for talented young people to work at some of the best companies right now, like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab. And because they are considered a sensitive industry in terms of the national security. So that's why SpaceX, for instance, cannot hire foreign workers, or they have a lot of trouble hiring foreign workers. And I think that's really unfortunate, because we're missing out on a lot of talent, and but on the other hand, for developing countries, it means their talent will, their most talented engineers won't be, moving away. So there will be less of this phenomenon of brain drain. So while I think the restrictions on hiring foreign workers are bad overall, there may be a silver lining for developing countries where the best talent won't be leaving, and so that's that's something which might be helpful. Again, I don't think it's good overall that there's these restrictions, but it maybe will help developing countries develop their own companies and space programs.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Rose. You have very good engagement with your TAF in Africa and other countries as well, especially with the developing nations. What your experience? What do you see from the African youth, specifically for these spaceships and AI and different kind of technological involvement?
Well, what I see in Africa with the young people and your audience specifically is a lot of excitement we've talked about with AI, new technologies, very techno-positive younger generation, digital natives coming up. And if we add to that, if you add to their interest in technology and wanting to be part of this fourth industrial revolution, add to that the space, the element of space. And we've talked about this a lot, and the way that we need to parallel a whole new economy based on our uniquely human skill sets, and let AI automation take over the menial tasks. And by adding space into the equation, it would further excite young people, because whatever they're interested in, whether it's the travel industry or textiles or whatever their specific passion is, we've talked about how they should include AI, or at least take an AI course to get just some general understanding, to know that this advent will be taking over whatever they're interested in a positive way, and will be able to augment their uniquely human skill sets. And so when you talk about space, you talk about colonization, and we talk about, ergonomic innovations for astronauts, and this is all everything that anybody would be interested in is still relevant when you're talking about space, especially for colonization of Mars. We're going to need homes, you're going to need appliances, you're going to need everything that we would need on Earth, and then some, in an enclosed environment. So I think just adding that to the equation, it should be very exciting for young people, and they should be thinking about their passions, but also thinking about their passions on Mars or in orbit. And I think that just adds to the excitement. And again, back to the idea of localizing certain regions or developing countries, what they're best at. There's always this talk about America's really good at coming up with ideas, and then Asian countries are really good at maximizing them and producing them en masse, and making them smaller, and these types of things. I think every region of the world has a very specific quality that can come to the fore. And if we really work together as Earthlings, as opposed to individual countries or military complexes, there's a lot of promise here. And so I would just extend what we've talked about in the past as far as the excitement of young people with technology, and localizing them and letting them know to find how to find their niche expertise, and adding to that in the equation the idea of putting it in orbit. And I think it just really adds to the whole excitement of what we are headed towards as a planet.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rob.
Well, as we look at the commercialization of space, a lot of what's going to have to happen is going to have to happen differently. Certainly, there'll be appliances and stuff on Mars, but chances are they're going to have to be built there. It's not like Amazon's going to roll a truck and put it on a booster and shoot it to another planet. Just the heavy lift costs are just too high. So that means advances in 3D printing, moving over to automated factories, something that is small and could be shipped in parts to a remote to another planet and put into place would be opportune. And the nice thing about the way we are now, as opposed to the way we were in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s when we were going after the moon launches, is that we've made huge advances in 3D printing, and the next big goal for that industry, and critical for colonization, is automated factories, where you put in raw materials and finished goods come out the backside. That's under development, and clearly smaller countries could take part in joint efforts to develop some of these resources and then benefit from the commercialization of them later on in the cycle. And the nice thing about and I was trying to get to this, the change between the 80s and now is the level of simulation we can do. We can do full on photorealistic simulation and with included physics to test this equipment in different environments digitally, as opposed to having to actually build it initially to do it. So the cost of doing this stuff has dropped dramatically over time and could fall within the budget of a development department in a relatively small company, or as part of an education effort to both train the students in the material as well as develop a baseline set of understanding and knowledge and skills to work in that new world. That's probably the best place for emerging economies to work right now, is to anticipate where these new industries will emerge and then start to develop ideas and where they're going to participate and carry through that way. A concept a friend of mine developed was called science fiction prototyping, where you use your imagination to create the world of tomorrow and then figure out the kinds of products that would fit into that world. It's actually used quite a bit in defense right now, at least U.S. defense. And then figure out where the gaps are, and then plan to fill those gaps where it makes economic sense. But if you wait until we're already in colonization and people have already built factories and all of that stuff's done, now you're competing from behind, and that's not something a small economy can do. A small economy can get beachheads, they can innovate, but if they try to trail a larger country, it's much harder for them to catch up because they don't have the economics are against them at that particular phase. So you could do some really interesting stuff. And given the internet and our methods of communicating and collaborating now, the other costs are vastly reduced. Travel costs are reduced. You can now collaborate with MIT from any place in the world if you want, and then jointly benefit from the result of that collaboration. These are things that typically required you to actually be on campus in the past, and right now that's not a requirement. So the costs have gone down, the benefits are going up, and I would say probably now is the time to at least dip your foot in and start to explore the areas that would make sense for the expertise that you have in country. I would think areas like disposal of waste would be areas that some of these emerging economies are actually already pretty well practiced in, and now they just have to be adopted to another planet or a different environment. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there, and but it's a matter of picking where your skill set fits fits and picking the partner you want to work with.
Thank you, Ma'am Chiara. Yes.
Well, going back to students and how to involve them and excite them about space, we have great opportunities, a lot of great opportunities with with Space Apps Hackathon by NASA, and also there is Act in Space by ESA, and so those are very important occasions where boys and girls can get to know about space data using free platforms and starting to understand how Earth observation is really important for us, and also you will wonder how can the economy benefit from space data. So you have to understand that those data can help, for example, the environment, because when you throw some plastic in the ocean, and then currents, so you can understand where those trash will go, so you can prevent the damage of the environment, for example. Or you can, for example, another thing, you can see where the new buildings are built in your city. So and also you can see if these buildings are sane where you want to buy your house or go for your investment. And so, for example, we had a great tragedy in Italy because one of our bridges fell, and so many people died, and NASA knew that there were already structural issues on this bridge. And so if we had used those data, we would have prevented this tragedy. So, for example, you can also count how many cars are in a parking lot outside from a Walmart, for example. So you will see the fluxes of people. So you can know when people will come to buy and when they won't. And so those amount of data are very, very important. And so I think that to get the population even of emerging countries closer to these to the opportunities of that the new space economy offers, then a hackathon is always a nice start.
Yes, this is actually a good idea. Even the hackathons and these things, I think that even many universities, school, college, they are arranging this kind of hackathon right now. But one specific point, what I'm observing, like example, even Mr. Rob said in terms of financial involvement and other things, it's my understanding, as I have a strong engagement with this ecosystem, they have many corporations. The corporation, they have money, but issue is that proper guidelines, like example, if they invest in these spaceships and AI, what will be the benefit? Second thing, proper human resources, like how the expert and the like we have different panelists. The panelist has expertise in AI and technologies and spaceships. So this is very important for developing nations. Like if we have a proper human resources, those who can guide different kind of corporations and government. Example, only Bangladesh last few years they invest $5 billion in startup. $5 billion. It's not a small amount of money. Even they invest money in spaceship, and they already they have their own space, and they are trying to developing a university as well. So issue is that proper planning, proper human resources. So in terms of finance and other things, I think from that own ecosystem, from their business organizations, from their corporations, they're also big, they're very capable as well. They can invest on these things. For that particular issues, we need good policy. good things. So what is your advice as an expert panelist, how we can encourage different corporations to invest on technology, invest on spaceships, AIs, like cyber securities? And another thing is that how we can develop like like good human resources, how we get can get some mentorships from, like example, today's panelists. This is important. Like what I understand, major point is human resources and good policy. So how do you want to add your analysis on that particular point, Mr. Dan?
Okay. Well, I think you brought up a really good point that you need the human resources, you need talent. Space is famously hard, right? It's not easy to develop rockets. Most spacecraft that have tried to land on Mars have failed over the decades. It's extremely challenging technically. So I think the limiting factor is more talent than money. You need really good engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as the technology gets more disseminated and kind of open sourced and stuff, it may become easier just to copy what's already out there. But right now, basically, if you want to have a startup or a space program, you need really good engineers. And unfortunately, because of national security restrictions and stuff, it's hard to quote, import those. So education is critical. Otherwise, as far as how to encourage startups, I think maybe Tom Ross brought up a relevant point, which is you should try to find a niche, try to find an area that's where there's not so much competition. So, for instance, and think long term. So think about what's going to happen when we have SpaceX starships going to Mars, and they're going at a regular cadence, and we have the first colony on Mars. There's going to be enormous need for a whole new types of manufacturing, healthcare. All the industries we have on Earth will need to be kind of redeveloped for Mars. And Elon Musk has said that he is only building the transportation infrastructure. He's not. SpaceX is not going to get into building the like the Mars colony and all that will go into that. And similarly with Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos has said they are just building the transportation infrastructure. So there will be a need for a lot of other services once real space colonization gets off the ground. So I believe that we will be landing on Mars. SpaceX will be landing people on Mars maybe in 10 years. And that's when there's going to be a huge need for all these other services. And so people countries that want to get into this should be thinking, on that kind of time horizon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you,
and
Mr.
It starts with education and
Yes.
and you really need long-term thinking for this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All these things take a long time, but they eventually will pay off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Tom Rose. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is one of the benefits of privatizing space is, like no politician has ever gotten elected by sending a rocket or sending something into space. They have gotten elected by bringing in jobs to build rockets. We have situations where there are rockets being built that have no intention of being launched, but they do produce jobs. And so there's a lot of effort to do this, to produce jobs. And that is a bottleneck because these people could have jobs in private companies and doing other things. So I think the question is really, it's between the infrastructure, like Dan said about SpaceX and Blue Origin developing the transportation system to get us there. That's the infrastructure, but there's also all the economies around that. Whether you don't even necessarily need to be on Mars. With virtual reality, just like we have drone pilots now, waging wars. With the advancements in virtual reality, just as Chiara said, how NASA has all this data about terrestrial structures and geo physics that are going on. We need people to analyze that stuff. We could have people using a virtual reality capsule to explore, to hone in on certain things that all this data is bringing in. So there's a lot of opportunity. That's what I mean by saying just adding space to the equation will excite young people even more so, I think. And we do need more of that. We need more analysis of the data that even Google Earth can offer. And so there's so much opportunity here, and not just in AI, not just in the technology, not just with engineers, but with the uniquely human skill sets. And we can't even imagine. There's going to be black swans all over the place with this new industry. Things we couldn't have imagined that will happen. That will be positive black swans, I think. So I just think it's all about using the best parts of our human nature, using the best parts of the privatization advent, and doing what we can to balance the militaristic version of these things or the political version of these things. I think that's got to change in general. And but yeah. So that's where I would stand on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rob.
Well, space is an expensive area to expand in, and the economics of space are quite far off in terms of businesses in space making money outside of some of the satellite businesses that we have right now, communications. And that means for anybody that's a smaller country, it really comes down to having a plan, executing the plan over a period of time, and the plan has to be founded in some kind of economic return, which means you can't just turn out students, because those students will end up working for companies that are in different countries who then will receive the benefit of the student's knowledge. You have to develop the entire ecosystem, at least around that talent. So you might develop a particular talent to develop a type of component, a type of silicon that might be better used in space. Battery technology is all over the map at the moment, and space exploration will require advanced batteries, with solid state batteries being probably on the cutting edge, and those are going to have to be manufactured someplace. And they've got broad application outside of just space, autonomous cars, appliances, and the rest are looking for some of these solutions. And those might be the best places for a smaller country, an emerging economy to address, because the opportunity could be both present and in the future. A lot of the stuff that we use right now, Velcro comes to mind, came out of the space program, and looking for those things that could be applicable in space, but also have economic value near term in the United States might be a better path to profit. And as was pointed out earlier, politicians get reelected when they provide benefits like jobs, like money. Just tossing a spaceship up into space isn't going to get you much of anything, but other than a really large bill. Certainly it's something that China and the US can fund, but other countries would probably struggle to do so. Even Russia is having trouble maintaining their space program economics, so that now that the US is no longer contracting with them for many of the launches. And so finding areas that have applicability both to solve domestic problems, I should say terrestrial problems, as well as space problems, or probably has the best short-term economic benefit. And the related innovation might come up with the next Velcro, might come up with the next advanced product that would have broad commercial use on the planet, as well as have potential in outer space. And those are the kinds of skills you need to develop. And right now, you need to be doing the exploration of for what are those areas that your country already has competence and manufacturing capacity, and how could those areas either be pivoted to the new opportunity or be advanced to address these new opportunities, so that those industries move into the future and don't get left behind by other countries and other contributions that find those innovative products first. Because once somebody solves the Velcro-like problem and gets to dominance, it becomes far harder then for the smaller entity to reach that same kind of saturation. But remember, even Apple was unprofitable and was going out of business in the 1990s, and they were able to pivot relatively surprisingly quickly to becoming one of the most valuable, and a couple times the most valuable company in the world. And that company could have certainly used resources from all over the world in what were at the time some emerging areas, and now that are far more developed, and looking for those opportunities now and building the technical competence and the manufacturing, at least the capability for the manufacturing capacity, now would put you on the leading edge of those opportunities and less likely to fall behind. Recognize when you're talking about investment with either governments or small companies or large companies, you're talking about return on investment and economics. And right now, the economics are stronger for a terrestrial solution based on space technology than they are for us, but for a uniquely space-based technology, because as I mentioned, the profitability is far higher for something you can sell in mass than it's going to be to sell something that might go up on 1, 2, or 3 rocket ships. Even though those products are going to be incredibly expensive, often they are incredibly unprofitable at the early phases. And so finding ways to use that, find technology that could be useful domestically as well as in space would probably be the best path for any young country trying to advance in this space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Chiara.
Yeah, as for education, I personally have a project for UNOSA Space for Women. As you will know, I am one of the 35 mentors for this program. And this program wants to help young women and young boys to enter space careers and study STEM and so access the space careers. And my project for this project is a global map of all the high schools and courses, also online courses and universities. And I'm doing this global map with the help of some other mentors. And one is, for example, I forgot, but anyways, we have been filling this map, and now it will be so very soon will be ready. So everyone will benefit from this because if you don't know where to go to study, for example, space law, or for example, if you want to go and be involved in the telecommunications, or maybe you want to study something else space related, like being a space doctor, or something else that it's not only STEM or technology, because we have to remember that once the ecosystem is running, then you need any type of professionals to build companies, because you will have to have someone specialized in business and someone in design and someone in engineering. So anyone can enter the space sector, and we wish that with this map we will help many boys and girls to understand where is the nearest school and the nearest university or the better course online. For startups, I really suggest that maybe you don't know, but there is NASA iTech, and with NASA iTech you can access patents from NASA, and you can use them to create technology from those patents that are have been created for space, then you can use it for Earth, and this is called spin-off. And NASA also has a great website with all the examples of NASA spin-offs. This is in America. In Europe, we have ESA, and we have the technology transfer program of ESA, and this program is made of many parts, and one of those parts is an incubation center, a business incubation center, where startups can have fundings and can have mentorings and can use ESA patents to create technologies to use on Earth. So also spin-offs, but also spin-in. And also, if you are a company, for example, you can ask, and there are many tenders where you can have fundings and mentoring to develop technology using those patents, those ESA patents created for space, and then use them for Earth. And this is, as Robert was saying, this is the real economy now. So things are running like this. You have to go to space to create some technologies that then you will use on Earth. And this space tech transfer technology is really, really useful for the economies now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Mr. Dan. You come up with one important point that for developing this kind of ecosystem, we need long-term investment. So, long-term investment plan, and this is really important. So, how do you want to analyze specifically this point? Because this is very, very important. Even in the developing nations, the corporate world, they want short-term return, and that's why they cannot develop. I want to say still they have to go a long way for developing knowledge-based society. So what does it mean, the long-term investment, and how it works, and like how many years they need plan?
Well, I'm not an expert in this area of investment, but I mean, what I observe is typically the only people that do really long-term investment are either government agencies that are investing in fundamental research, or maybe venture capitalists. Like you said, most companies, and especially publicly traded companies, are more focused on short-term profit. Yeah, I think you need visionary long-term thinkers, and there may be some short-term ways of making money, like Shara was saying, maybe doing satellite monitoring of your things going on in your country, whether it be looking at traffic flows or climate change. There may be some opportunities there. There may be some short-term opportunities to develop like new materials or niche technologies, but I think a lot of the big economic benefits are much further out, like looking at colonization and having space tourism, and eventually maybe asteroid mining. But that's, I think, at least a decade away. So you have to be thinking on that time horizon. We do have companies in the U.S. that are thinking on that time horizon, and so for developing countries to compete, I think they also have to be thinking on that time horizon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There are a few questions from audience. I want to take just 2-3 questions. What is the most effective government role in space commerce? Another question is that in international governments of the space environment effective? And the final questions I want to take that, I think, what are the rules in space and these things? Mr. Tom.
Let's see what the first question was. what's government's role in commerce. And as John was saying, we need to think long term, and governments are better at thinking. 10 years is now considered long term, but a government can come in and start a program and think in a 10-year and a decade-long phase, and there could be short-term financial gain for private companies who get government contracts. If a government decides that they want to own this niche or corner this market in space in 10, 15 years, they can start gathering ideas and innovations from their local companies. And so government could play a very big role right now because they can think in long term, at least 10-year periods. And within that 10 years, you can have all kinds of government contracts if they invest in. So it'd be a smart thing to do for a government who is a smart government to do a 10-year plan and decide on a niche or an area that they want to, that they've identified as a potential way to corner that market, and then invite private companies, startups to start innovating in that area. And so I think that's really the best use of government right now, since everything else is being privatized, is to allow, give space to private companies to innovate and to own that niche.
Thank you, Mr. Rob.
I think I'll leave the rules in space to Shira. She seems to be the expert in that space, deep reuse space. But most effective government roles. Government performs two primary roles in three maybe. The exploration, governance, in other words, applying laws to what's going on out there, and then financial contributions. To help fund the new exploration, fund the new industries, and drive resources towards that new space. That's probably the best place for government to play. The United States, clearly the government got involved in direct exploration. That probably kind of breaks from the model the world had before that, where government funded private exploration to a large extent and then benefited from it. And that's the path we're on right now. Governments are funding to a much larger degree private companies that are doing much of the exploration and development, and that's where you get leverage. Plus, you're building an industry that is designed to be profitable early on, as opposed to the way the U.S. did it, where much of the space exploration was a black hole where money went in and some inventions came out, but you wouldn't call it a viable business. Now it is becoming a viable business. So governments making sure that their interests are represented in terms of the rule of law, and at an international level, governments making sure there's funding going into internal companies and entities that can benefit from those roles, and then also making sure that the resources are properly attributed to the future. And let's see, what was the other question? Was there another question? Sorry, I don't see the questions, and so I'm kind of. That was the most effective government in space, commerce. That one I covered. What's the next one? International government space, environment effect. Not now. It's not. There really is no enforcement vehicle. If we had open conflict in space, there are a lot of laws and rules, but it's unclear how those would be enforced. We have trouble enforcing terrestrial rules between companies. The Paris Accord comes to mind. I mean, people made promises. Most of the governments did not live up to those promises, and so some did. But that kind of showcases the nature of terrestrial control over common resources. It's been kind of a mess. If we look at the pollution of the ocean, that was something you would expect we would have wrapped our arms around by now, and we clearly have not. So you're not yet in a place where we have the power to enforce, nor is it very clear that the rules that are in place are enforceable. The agencies that have put them in place, it's kind of voluntary compliance, short of military involvement, and thus the U.S. Space Force, where there are really no governments in a good position to enforce behavior in outer space. If we had, for instance, two entities fighting over real estate in the moon. We don't really have an entity that could mediate that effectively outside of the United Nations. And once again, the United Nations doesn't have a space force. So unlike what they can do on the planet, where they can roll a UN military force to solve a dispute, they don't have that capability in space yet. And eventually they're going to need it. I mean, eventually we're going to need the capability, and probably better sooner than later, to solve disputes off planet. I mean, even in orbit, it's not really clear what we could do if a country with orbital capability, like say North Korea, decided to go up and start blowing up satellites, short of declaring war on them. And we probably need some interim steps that could be applied so that doesn't happen, because I certainly can see that as a scenario in some of the simulations we've developed in the past that talks about space warfare and the things that could come out of that. We don't have an answer for any of them in actual fact. We have concepts, we've got theories, we've got possibilities, but doesn't give you a great deal of confidence that you could resolve the underlying problem. So we've got a lot of work to do before something goes off the rails. And sadly, often and historically, what's happened is we've had a conflict, and that conflict has resulted in rules that can be enforced. And my hope is we get the rules and we don't get the conflict, but history is probably going to prove me wrong again.
Thank you, Mr. Yes, Chiara.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Robert, and even if we have to say that UNOSA is the only I don't remember the name. Anyways, it's not association. Sorry, today I am a little bit confused. Organism is the only organization and organism that is trying to help and develop those policies. So up to now, what really counts in space are rules that are quite similar to the maritime laws. And now they are trying to, they also signed a memorandum of understanding with NASA for the Pacific use of outer space and for the Pacific use of resources out there. So, but as Rob said, we cannot, it's very difficult, and it's a really, really tough task. But they are trying. They are trying hard, and this is very important. That as United Nations countries, we could get together and decide together of what will happen and what can happen. And this is a subject of study even in universities, because now many students also and many professors are trying to develop and study cases to understand and to have a prospect of the future. But I agree with Robert that it's a tough question, and we will see many things happening in the very near future.
Thank you. Actually, this is our objective, World Talent Economy Forum. We are trying to strongly work with governments, corporations, as well as different kind of academic institutions, universities, and school, college. So our major target is that we need to develop a knowledge-based community, and definitely how we getting support from different kind of our speakers. I'm sure many of our youth community, especially those who are the future for our nation, those who are the future for Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they are really benefited from this World Talent Economy Forum discussion. Besides that, this year we want to develop more academy, more conference and summit, and we are involving with different kind of corporations and government, because corporate need to invest on knowledge-based community. Definitely the developing nations, they have to do it. We need to, we can understand that they have available fund and other things. We need to create awareness. We need to motivate them. What will be the benefit benefit of this knowledge-based community. So we are also observing TAF doing fantastic works in Africa, and soon hopefully we will see them in Asia Pacifics. Mr. Rob and Chiara, even Dan, everybody doing fantastic works. And in our summit, we want to invite everyone. Soon this year's April, we will arrange these things, and already we are getting very good response from around the world. Even last month, we attend this ASSOCHAM conference. Tata Group's chairmen, Mr. Ratan Tata also there. All of the business organizations from India, they were there. Indian Prime Ministers, Mr. Narendra Modi also there. So we are getting that every nation's country like India, they are very big, even China, every nation, they are taking initiative. Now they are understanding that they have to build a better ecosystem, and we need knowledgeable person, we need expert people, we need better professional people, those who can help us to develop this better ecosystem. So that is our objective. World Talent Economy Forums, we are trying to developing better ecosystems, and hopefully this year will be very much interesting, and we are getting huge response from corporations, government. Already we are getting support from corporations. Many area, they do not have internet connection still. Example, in Nepal, we have our students. In Himalaya, we have our students, but they do not have enough internet connections. So few of the corporations, they are supporting us. They provide 10,000 laptops, and with this World Talent Economy Forum, all of the content we are distributing. Our content to all of the students. This is our major project right now, and hopefully with the collaborations of all of our panelists, already we have 200 different panelists, those who join us, those who supporting us, everybody supporting us. We need more of your support. By these things, hopefully we can change the youth community. Youth are the futures, and they can change their community. That is the objective. And I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today's sessions. First, Mr. Tom, then Mr. Rob, and finally, Chiara. Yes, Mr. Tom.
Well, thanks again, Sharif, for inviting me. Your audience is always so engaged, and it's so important what we're doing with TAFs and another entity that I'm developing called Earth Plexus. Is all about enabling the youth, and through outlets like this. And so that's just, it's exciting. And like today's conversation, we've talked about AI quite a bit, and the techno-positive, optimistic nature of young people today when it comes to technology, and adding space to the equation just really increases that that excitement. And so we're just very happy to be involved with you and everything you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Mr. Rob.
Well, this is a fascinating area. This is one of the exploration is really what transitions us into a modern economy eventually, and as we go into exploration out of space, it's likely going to transition us to something else. Industries that are most likely to benefit long-term are robotics, artificial intelligence, and energy storage and delivery. So that, because it's most everything runs off batteries, and batteries that we currently don't have. So those are areas to focus on. It's certainly an exciting area, but it's also an area that's going to have a lot of stops and starts. And so making sure that you have broad skill base, you're not putting all your eggs in one particular basket in case that basket doesn't pan out, is really smart. And the final comment is we've got capability to do simulation at scale now. You don't have to build stuff to test it. You can do simulations. And the more you do simulation, understand simulation, the better able you are to position your economy, position your future businesses, and position your citizens to the world of tomorrow. And it's coming. We may not have a great idea about what that world's going to be, but if you're not prepared, you're going to be in trouble. So be prepared. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. Chiara.
Yeah, I think that your country could do like Japan in the ancient times. Japan passed from this very agricultural and ancient economy to a very modern and wonderful and wonderfully new economy. And they didn't have the passage from the Industrial Revolution. So it was like passing from the Middle Ages to now. And I think it one of the best things of space is that it gives you this opportunity. And I know you should plan for something bigger, but you can start now having internet. With internet, you can really revolutionize your economy. And having internet and internet access gives you access to space data, and having space data gives you the opportunity to change agriculture, transportation, energy, and so many things that I know it sounds crazy, but really space data can be used in every type of economy. So good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining session. I directly want to request. I know this live session, many students they are observing. Beside that, we will distribute with many of our youth community. I request that Mr. Tom, Mr. Rob, Chiara, even Dan, everybody is expert in their field. You can learn many things, and they are the best mentors around the world. So if you observe these shows, and I'm sure you can communicate with them, they will give you support. Even from with TAF, with World Talent Economy Forums, we can arrange different kind of academy. You just join, then you can learn many things together, and by this way you can grow your skills. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for today's sessions.